Coming to you from the North Pole? What? It's the Little Podcast of Horrors with James, Christina, Chris, and Santa?
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas! Beat you.
Oh. Merry Christmas. Welcome to Little Christmas Podcast of Horrors
I know, right?
with your hosts, Chris, Christina, and this guy right here,
James.
who may or may not be James.
Yes. Merry Christmas to everybody out there. Also, happy Hanukkah, happy first day of Hanukkah. Today is officially the first day of Hanukkah. So to any of our listeners who are of the Jewish faith, happy Hanukkah to you. And if you don't celebrate anything, just
a happy winter solstice to you.
yes.
Or in our case, say horror Hanukkah.
Oh my goodness.
Happy monster apocalypse. Happy nightmares. So what is everybody drinking today?
So I am drinking Prairie Artisan Ale's Christmas Bomb.
Ooh,
To be,
okay.
to be up with the season. So it's a imperial stouts brewed with some Christmas spices like cinnamon and some other stuff. It's very dark and very Christmassy.
Yummy.
The
That sounds
spicy
good.
Christmas.
Chrissy Tina, what are you drinking?
Well, I have 3 drinks.
Dang. I just got 3 drinks.
Are you just taking a sip from one at a time?
Just
Rotating through them.
I'm fine.
2 are non-alcoholic, to be fair. So I do have some eggnog, but I didn't have bourbon, so it's just eggnog. But it's good. It's like oat milk eggnog. It's good.
Yummy.
And then water, of course. You have to have your water. Stay hydrated. And then I'm drinking a Shiner Bock.
Nice. Well,
About you?
I'm drinking a Michter's small batch American whiskey. This is an American whiskey, and it doesn't qualify as a bourbon because it's aged in used oak barrels instead of new barrels. Thank you, Jeremy, our good friend, and Christina's brother-in-law, who wrote that little piece. It's good. I mean, it's good. I mean, not my favorite, but hey.
It'll do.
It'll do.
We won't be getting a sponsorship from.
Yeah. Michter's is like, hey, he's drinking. Well, forget that.
I just want the commercial motto to be "It'll do."
Yes. It's like OK Cola. You guys remember OK Cola?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's funny you say that too.
It's okay.
What is it called? So I just learned recently that there is this, I will say liquor, that's made, I believe, in Illinois, in Chicago. Like you can only get it there, but it's famous for being horrible. Like they wear it as a badge of honor. And I kid you not, one of their taglines is, they say the name of the thing, tonight you're going to fight your dad.
Oh my God.
Nice.
And one guy drank it, and it's actually a challenge. Like people are challenged to drink it, and their reaction is priceless. Like I've almost thought about like, I want to get a bottle of this so James and I can try it. But then
They should name it like the Home Wrecker.
They have a lot of tag
there
names.
You go.
They have a lot of tag names for it. I'll have to look that up. I'm sorry. But yeah. If you know the name of this, email us at littlepodcasthorrors
at gmail.com.
At gmail.com. You're gonna be like, okay, I mean, whatever. No, sure. So all righty. Well, so today we're going to each be sharing a story that the theme is Christmas, but it's also Little Podcast Horror. So
Yeah, so who
you
knows what's
know.
gonna happen?
There's not going to be any happy joyfulness. We might thrill you, we might frighten you. I mean, that's our job, right? So
Well, if people watch the video, they'll see us in our ugly Christmas sweaters. Let me stand up.
oh, you can't see it now because it's blurred. Hold on. Gotta... I'll just do it like this the whole time.
Once upon a time,
Santa
was-
telling the story.
Santa was telling a story. Oh.
And we
Yeah.
also have Zoom effects today. So I'm a reindeer and Chris has lots of string lights and James is a fuddy duddy. So he didn't.
I
hear.
have lots of lights going on. They're just not on screen. They're facing me so I can see them.
He's being Scrooge. He's like, I don't need it. I got lights right there. Who needs it? Anyway, why don't we get the show on the road? James
Yeah.
is going to start us out with his tale. Take it away, James.
So, for you two parents here, when did you tell your kid and or kids plural that Santa wasn't real?
Well, Charles figured it out, and he was just very matter of fact about it. He's like, look, I mean, like, I didn't know what he was about to say. He just kind of sat down, was very matter of fact. He's like, I know he's not real. I was like, oh, Ben was last year. We finally confessed everything to Ben last year. And of course, Ben being Ben, he's immediately like, now he wants to be involved. And so he's very much looking forward to it. And Henry still doesn't know.
Elliot was probably like 6 or 7. But it actually came about because he was really questioning the Easter Bunny. And he was like, I really want to know the truth. Is the Easter Bunny real? Because it's too weird. And I was like, no, he's not real. Like I do these things for you. He's not real.
I don't
Okay,
think I
well,
ever believed in the Easter Bunny.
yeah. Well, if that's not real, is Santa real? And I was like, do you really want to know the truth? Like, yes, tell me the truth.
And then you just transform right into Santa. He is real and I
I'm
before you,
Santa.
child. Believe in me and never die.
Santa lives in the heart of every child. No, and then he cried because he was kind of upset about it. But...
Well, you made your kid cry for no reason.
Oh shit.
As it turns out, Santa is real.
What?
What?
So by saying he wasn't real, you were telling the lie all along.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
let me
Became the
introduce
lie.
you to a gentleman by the name of Stephen Wagner, who is currently the world's leading expert on real life Santa sightings.
I just want to see his resume now.
And by leading expert, I also mean only expert. But that's semantics.
Did you look up his LinkedIn? Is it on there?
I didn't. I should have.
So, like, what is he like? I am an official. I have a doctorate in Santa Clausology. What?
So real quick before I forget to mention it, to cite my sources, get that out of the way. Everything I'll be telling you today was pulled from the Boston Globe, Stephen Wagner's own material, a site called Stranger Dimensions. I'll be citing a few threads from r/paranormal, and then lastly a site called Mysterious Universe. So anyway, our boy Stephen Wagner lives in Little Falls, New York, and he has been a paranormal researcher for 30 years, 3 decades.
Okay.
Dedication.
His most significant claim of fame is he is the author of the book entitled Touched by a Miracle: True Stories of Ordinary People and Extraordinary Experiences. And he's also been, as far as that resume goes, he has also been running a site called Paranormal Phenomenon on about.com for about 14 years. So if you want to check that out, that's paranormal.about.com. He has received, as the leading and only expert on Santa sightings, he's collected over the years several hundred submissions from various people around the world and of their real life Santa sightings. And
Whoa.
he is of the opinion that most of the ones he receives seem to be quite genuine.
Ooh.
And to give you a quick Stephen Wagner quote, he says, over the years, children all over the world have reported sightings of the real Santa Claus, not department store Santas or bell ringing Salvation Army charity collectors, but the real thing.
Did any adults
Yes.
write in? Okay.
Yes.
Interesting.
Not that I don't believe in children, but I'm just wondering.
We all know children are liars. Give me somebody who's an adult. I want something concrete.
So,
I don't know why I
this
just became
being
like a 1930s New York newspaper
broadcaster.
editor. Get me something concrete. I can't print this.
So Wagner's approach being that he's collected all these little stories. We're not going to have like one big story, but just a lot of little short eyewitness accounts. But if you go to one of his other sites, which is he's a frequent writer on liveabout.com, and I'm just going to share a couple of the more interesting stories he's collected. So to start off, this one that was submitted to Wagner are some. It's a story that consists of several real Santa Claus sightings in New York City in 2002, 2004, and 2007. So, as reading the writer's submission here, it was Christmas Eve of 2002 in New York City. My parents had invited some friends and relatives over for dinner, sort of like a Christmas Eve celebration. After that, I decided to go to my room to watch some television, but there was nothing good to watch. I then found myself pacing back and forth in the hallway. My house is big, so there was no one with me. Everyone was in the living room watching a movie I wasn't interested in. About 7 minutes into my pacing, I saw a tall, fat figure scurry away about 20 feet away from me.
What, in the house?
Yes.
Oh my god.
No, thank you.
I'm sorry. Stranger danger. I thought
was
this was gonna be outside.
Nope.
Sorry.
It was crouched down too. It was even wearing some sort of Santa Claus suit. I didn't believe in Santa, but this just freaked me out. There was a strange man in my house.
Yeah.
I quickly ran to where my parents were and told them all about it. They grinned at me and said jokingly, maybe it was Santa Claus. I didn't believe that, so I just sat down in the living room with my family and everybody else. Then it occurred again on Christmas Eve 2004. I remember it more vividly than the last one. I was lying on the couch in the living room. My parents were in the kitchen having a conversation about a business blog or something. Suddenly, I saw a huge man, about 7 or 8 feet tall, crawl underneath the tree and just vanish.
No.
No.
Oh my god. You are freaking me out.
No. I'm taking the tree down. No.
No.
Mm-mm.
Before it disappeared, it looked at me and said, shh.
Oh my god.
What the hell?
This
Very
is a
strange.
nightmare. This is scary.
Strange. So I went to the kitchen and sat with my parents. I like that his solution every time is I'm just going to go sit with my parents.
I like
Similar-
that they don't check out the house at all.
I would have been
either
like,
time.
right. They
This
just go,
thing is
"Baby, it was
real.
Santa
This is
Claus,"
not a
and let it
damn
go.
joke. You be parents, get your asses in there and find out what's going on. Quit laughing at me. Oh man, there'd been a fight there right then and there. I'd be like, I'm out.
So
Ooh.
to wrap up this one, he says similar happenings occurred the following Christmases. I recall one in 2007. It was daylight this time, and I just happened to see another tall figure with a Santa hat trudge by me for 2 seconds. Then it was gone. This really happened. And this is a gentleman by the name of Claxton Kalmbach, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who submitted that story.
What state were they in again?
New
Did
York.
they say? New York. Okay, I thought so.
New York.
Oh my gosh. I feel like they just had somebody living in their house the whole time, like in their attic.
Who could just vanish from sight.
Yeah.
And was 7 feet tall.
Yeah. Crawling out of the tree.
Giant living in their house, just like always wearing the Santa costume. That is creepy. Okay, sorry, continue on. Freaking out.
So the next another short submitted to Wagner. This one's considerably shorter. It's just a quickie, but this one was in 2003, and the submitter's name is simply Jade, and she says, "I am 13 now, but I saw something when I was 7. It was dark, nighttime, around midnight on Christmas Eve. I was in bed, but I wasn't asleep. Who could be? All of a sudden, I saw a red light beaming down into my window. It was so bright, and somehow I knew it was him. I looked up at the sky, but all I could see was the bright light coming from a
Satan?
small object."
Like a UFO is about to take this poor little girl.
Right?
Oh, she's like, I knew it was him. They call me Satan.
Yes. I looked up at the sky, but all I could see was the bright light coming from a small object. I didn't hear a helicopter or anything, but I did hear the unique sound of bells, and of course, the sound of hooves tapping on the roof. These sounds lasted for a few seconds after the light had disappeared. Then they were gone. And that is all to that one.
Oh my god.
She was never heard from again.
Right.
Literally.
Here's one more submitted to Wagner from a lady named Anna. And she says, "I was 5 years old and I was in my room when I heard shuffling in the living room. I got up and peered around the doorway where I saw a man in a Santa suit standing in front of a Christmas tree. He must have felt my presence because he turned around and looked at me. He didn't look jolly or kind and happy like you would expect Santa Claus to look. He looked kind of eerie, like he was staring into my soul.
Krampus.
Automatically, I ran into my parents' room and hid under the covers. I don't know why I was so scared at the time, but I wrote it off as a dream for a while before I forgot about it completely. Years later, I remembered it. I thought it could have been a burglar, but when I asked my parents, nothing was ever missing from that apartment. The only time we were ever robbed was when we moved later on. The only explanation I have now is that it was some kind of apparition."
Mm.
That's lovely. He didn't seem jolly. No witnesses.
Oh my god.
So I've got 2 more stories to share with you. These 2 come from Reddit, from the r/paranormal. And I'm presuming these are a couple of the more popular ones. But this first one was submitted 5 years ago by a user named Vimnox, or Vimnox. And he says, or they say, or whatever, whoever it is behind Vimnox,
Whoever you are.
"I've been holding on to this for 25 years. I'm in my 30s now, and this happened when I was 7 years old. I've only told this story to my parents and to my wife, namely because of the overwhelming fear of pure doubt and skepticism. But I was inspired by a 2014 post by another user, along with comments from blah, 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 other users, and so many more. On to the story. I was 7 years old in 1990 and spending Christmas, as usual, at my grandparents' house. Normally, I slept in my own room there, but as a child, I never, ever slept on Christmas night out of excitement. So my grandparents let me sleep in the bed in between them. We went to bed around 10 a.m. and, as usual, I was just laying there wide awake. A little while later, I hear distinct, heavy footprints walk into the room, I presume footsteps, along with the light sound of bells. Now, the room was very dark at the time, so I could only make out the unmistakable shape of Santa out of the corner of my eyes. I was laying on my right side at the time, facing my grandfather's back. My grandpa has always been the loudest snorer in the world, and this time was no exception. Petrified, frozen, and pretending to be asleep, I just lay there for what seemed like an eternity. Almost silently, the figure had moved from the foot of the bed to the side my grandfather was on. Every time he snored thereon, the distinct glove of Santa patted him gently. This went on for
Mm-hmm.
maybe half a dozen pats. Then the figure had moved again to the foot of the bed. The figure gestured slightly, and the next thing I knew, I was passed out, fast asleep till morning. Now, I'm the first person to discount a story like this with a yeah, okay, buddy. So let me myth bust a few things. Was it your dad? My dad was not nearly the size of this figure. Moreover, he was never, ever the type to do something like this, even for a child. Could have been a family friend dressed as Santa. Guess, but it would have been the most unusual time for a Santa to come in, late at night, long after everyone is legit asleep, and in the pitch black.
Yeah.
Don't you think they'd have wanted their friend to come when they could actually see my reaction when I was awake? Finally, that would have been the most insanely elaborate costume ever. Could have been a dream. Absolutely not. I was wide awake and there was far too much detail. Could have been some sort of hallucination, or, as I'll bring up here in a few, could it be a tulpa? Possibly.
Oh.
What did your parents and grandparents have to say about it? My grandparents had no recollection as they were fast asleep. They, along with my father, were all sarcastically, "Sure, he appeared, buddy," to me. My mother, on the other hand, still believes me to this day because she, coincidentally exactly when she was 7, said she too saw Santa. Look, I'm embarrassed to even post this because I know the modern image of Santa is largely driven from pop culture. I'm a father myself now of 3 kids, so I do all the Christmas grunt work. But I still maintain that one Christmas I saw something or someone that looked like Santa.
I like the tulpa idea.
Yeah.
Right? Well,
That
we'll
makes
touch
sense.
we'll touch that more in a minute
Mhm.
here. So the last story, also from More Paranormal, a bit shorter here, is from AARPCARD. No, I had no idea how to pronounce that username. But they say, and this was also 5 years ago, coincidentally, it's very interesting that the majority of the stories here happened when the person was 7. I have a story too, but it happened when I was 11, around the time I was beginning to doubt Santa was real. Christmas Eve, around 2:30 a.m., and I had to pee really badly. The only bathroom in our house was downstairs on the first floor. To get to it, I would have to walk through the living room where the tree was. I knew my parents always stayed up late on Christmas Eve in the living room wrapping presents, and I didn't want to interrupt them and have them get mad at me, so I waited and held my bladder. Eventually, I couldn't hold it anymore and had to go, so I crept to the top of the stairs and started going down. I could see that the light in the living room was on, but the whole house was extremely quiet. I silently tiptoed down the stairs and peeked my head out around the corner to look into the living room. Santa Claus was sitting on a recliner, eating one of the cookies we left for him and looking at our tree. All the
Oh my
lights were on in the
God.
room. The guy was way too big to be my father. So I had 2 options: either pee my pants or run through the living room right in front of Santa to get to the bathroom. It took about 5 minutes of deliberating, but eventually I just ran as quietly as I could through the living room, down the hall, and into the bathroom. I made sure to not look directly at Santa for some reason, just felt I shouldn't. When I finished in the bathroom, Santa was gone and the house was in darkness. I was lucid and definitely not sleepwalking. My parents told me they heard me flush the toilet that night, so it wasn't a dream. That Christmas was pretty tough for my family because my dad lost his job and we were maybe 2 to 3 weeks away from being homeless. Ultimately, everything
Aw.
worked out, but the timing is thought provoking.
That is wild. He's like, I'll choose certain death and run to the bathroom.
Right?
Rather
Well,
than
I
pee my
mean,
pants.
You're trusting that it's Santa, and Santa's not gonna hurt you, so
Yeah, I
Right.
guess so.
So let's talk about what these Santa sightings could be. So of course it's actually Santa. But if you've noticed kind of a theme here, many of these people writing in describe an entity like Santa instead of Santa. Perhaps this was a spirit, a ghost, an apparition. And then another theory is that perhaps what they're seeing are interdimensional tricksters of a kind. So maybe gnomes, demons, angels, what's called impossible animals, stuff like that.
Okay.
So with that in mind, let me read you one last story. That kind of is on theme with this. So this person, this is on the Mysterious Universe site, writes, as I opened my door, standing there blocking my path was Mother effing Santa Claus.
Oh my God, that's Mother
Yes.
Santa. Holy
Solid
shit.
writing.
As I live and breathe.
He was
Solid
dressed
story,
exactly how I had imagined him. He looked like the typical Coca-Cola Santa, down to his white woolen trimmings, thick black
Wow.
belt with a golden buckle and red nightcap. He had small, circular gold-trimmed glasses, a white curly beard, blue eyes, and liver spots on his cheeks. I froze and looked up at his eyes. He had what I took to be a stern expression on his face, almost glaring at me. Just after we made eye contact, he bent his head down towards me, slightly in a manner that suggested, what are you doing up? You shouldn't be awake. Go back to bed.
I don't like this.
I gasped, took a few steps back, and then jumped into my bed, turned my back to the door, closed my eyes, and then fell asleep, despite my state of shock. I remember thinking at the time, Santa doesn't like kids being awake because he can't drop off presents otherwise. So it was as if I knew that I should go back to sleep. The song about Santa Claus comes to mind. He knows when you're sleeping. He knows when you're awake. I didn't get a menacing feeling from him. I didn't feel that I was in any danger. I felt maybe that I was in a bit of trouble for seeing him, that he was annoyed at me. He didn't seem joyful or loving either, just neutral, I guess.
I don't know what to say about that.
Hence the idea that this may be a tulpa. So if you were familiar with tulpas, which I was not, but a tulpa is, from what I understand this for, a very real manifestation of something, but emanates from inside the human mind. So it's like a thought projection, just like I think we were talking about it in the Shut Up People episode. Like,
Yeah.
you believe in it so much that it becomes real, right?
Right.
So in other words, free roaming entities more permanent than the belief that are causing it. So Santa could be a tulpa, or a tulpa appearing in Santa. Of note, tulpas can, once they are believed into existence, upon existing, they can, from that point forward, act independently and then change forms into whatever they want to look like. And then to quote, on the topic of tulpas, to quote a Belgian explorer, Alexandra David Neal, from his book, Magic and Mystery in Tibet, once the tulpa is endowed with enough vitality to be capable of playing the part of a real being, it tends to free itself from its maker's control. This, say, Tibetan occultist, happens nearly mechanically, just as the child, when his body is completed and able to live apart, leaves its mother's womb.
Really quick, Christina, can you see James?
I can, but he's frozen.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
Okay, it's not just me. It's
No.
He was frozen and now it's just blank. All right, I was trying to make
Mhm.
sure something was wrong with my computer. Okay,
No.
just James.
Just James.
There we go. I fixed it.
Yay.
Yeah, I heard a USB disconnect sound. I was like, uh-oh, I hope that wasn't something important.
This is mostly radio anyway, so it's fine.
So anywho, Santa's a tulpa.
I think that I love that idea. That makes
Yeah.
total sense to me. Like, so many people around the world believe it, like, especially like child energy, just like that pure, unquestioning belief that you have in something. I mean,
Wow.
if anything can create a tulpa, it's got to be that.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me because my problem with it actually being Santa is Santa was originally derived from the very real, Saint Nicholas.
Yeah.
Which, by the
Right.
way, Saint Nicholas is a far more colorful character than Santa Claus.
Yeah.
The dude, if I recall correctly, tended to get into just like barroom level brawls with people over theological disagreements, just fisticuffs.
Yeah.
So
Well, and also, so none of these beings are leaving presents either, obviously. They're just like in their space.
right,
And eating
crawling under
cookies.
trees.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
kind of doing like adjacent, like Santa Claus adjacent things, but they're not doing like the gift giving part or riding around on, reindeer drawn sleighs, even though a girl did see a light outside or whatever. But
Well,
so it's like almost incomplete Santa, but like
Yeah.
just yeah. Anyway, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
this happened to me too.
What?
What?
No fucking way.
So I don't know if I was 7. I was around that age, and I'll always remember this. I woke up. It's Christmas Eve, and it's like my home that I lived in as a small child.
Was it the haunted one?
No, it was before that.
Oh,
This
okay.
is my parents were still married. That's like I was
okay.
little. And the first thing I noticed that and this was one of the rare times I was actually sleeping in my room. I had a lot of issues as a child. And so most of the time I usually slept with my parents. But this is one of the rare times I can recall actually sleeping in my bedroom, and the door was almost shut except for a crack. And I could hear somebody was in the living room. I could hear moving around, and I got scared. Like I just freaked out. And I didn't know what to do. And then I got more scared when I could hear my dad snoring, because my dad's a very loud snorer. And then I got even more scared when I heard my mother cough, obviously from the bedroom. So that's not them. And so
Oh
I
my
remember,
gosh.
as best as I can recall, I remember being terrified. And I tried to and so what I did was, I remember I just laid down and I closed my eyes and just tried as best I could to fall asleep, but I couldn't because I'm scared. And I'm laying there. And this part I will never forget was suddenly right in my ear, as if right here, I just hear Christopher.
No way. Oh, what?
Yep.
I
am not kidding.
Christmas.
I'm not kidding. I have always remembered that. Now, here's the weird part. I can't remember what happened next.
He
I
put
don't-
you to sleep.
I guess.
Like the other one. He was
I
like,
guess.
"Whoop."
I don't remember if I fell asleep or what, but I remember the next morning waking up, gifts all around the tree. And I didn't talk about it because I was just kind of like, it wasn't like oh, Santa. It was more like, what the hell was that?
So what I'm
Like-
learning from all this is Santa is just a mischievous dick.
Yeah.
Who goes into
I'm
a kid's
shook.
room and gets right in his ear and just says his
Yeah.
name like that?
Yes. I'm shook to my core.
Ugh,
I'm freaking out. Chris.
yeah.
He knows when you are sleeping.
Yeah,
except
he
for when
knew.
people
Yeah.
repeatedly accidentally walk in on him.
Yeah.
Now, nothing like that ever happened to me ever again. There was an incident. My father is a performer. And so he would get into trying to convince me Santa was real. And, he'd ring like the jingle bells past the window and, like, oh, but he did this to the point where like I was 12, I think maybe almost 13. And I'm just like, and then he started doing it for my sister, but he was still trying to get me to go along with it. And I remember being like, okay. But there was one Christmas Eve where we were getting my sister to go to sleep because she used to have night terrors. And I was laying in the bedroom with her. We were at my grandmother's house. And I think, Gran was in there with us. And at this point, my sister's asleep and we hear walking on the roof. But here's the thing.
God.
We instantly think it's Dad. We're just kind of like, but the problem was it had sleeted. And so we're thinking like,
Oh,
that guy's going to fall off the roof and kill himself trying to convince my sister, who's asleep, that Santa's real. And my grandmother jumps up. She's like, he's gonna break his neck. What is he doing? And I'm like, we gotta get him off the damn roof. And we walk into the living room, and just as we do, he's walking in the front door. And of course, we're like, Dad, are you crazy? You could have fallen. He's like, what are you talking about? And we're like, we heard you. We know that was you. What was me? And then suddenly we hear again on the roof. And we're all standing there. My father's standing there. My grandmother's standing there. It's nobody else. And we were just like, what? And so we run out. And of course, my father just runs out there. And we run out there and we don't see anything. Nothing there. And we're like, well, maybe it's just, ice falling from the tree. But like, we were all like, that really sounded like footsteps.
That is spooky.
Well, you've told us previously about the little like gremlin gnome. What's it thing?
Yes, but that was in a different house. That was to give our listeners. So the original house I lived in, from the time I think I was 1 till I was 11, and then my grandmother's house that she had for 50 years, and she sold it just before she passed away just a couple of years ago. And then I lived in the house with the gremlin before we moved to Bryant.
He fed his mogwai after midnight,
I guess. But no, this occurred. Both of these incidents did not occur at the gremlin house. We'll call it that. The walking on the roof was Grant's house. And then the whispering in my ear was my first house.
That is crazy.
Yeah. So I don't know, but it was the only time anything has ever happened as far as something like that to me.
Well, I think the creepiest detail of these stories was just the part where Santa is standing for an awkwardly long time by the grandfather, just patting him every time he snores.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
What the hell is
I don't
that
like
about?
that at all.
That ain't right, yo.
Nope.
And he's out because otherwise you would wake up to someone patting you.
Right.
Oh my God. He's like, I'm going to make them stay out so I can keep patting you for inexplicable reasons.
Right.
What does it mean? Maybe this was a trickster newly informed and was like, let me make sure I can actually touch things.
Soon it'll all be over.
Oh my gosh.
I'll be like,
That is creepy. Christopher.
just like that. Right in my damn ear.
Okay, well, Santa needs to stop being creepy. That's what I'm hearing.
Knock it off, Nick.
All right. Is there any more to that story? Are we done with Santa Claus sightings?
Do we want there to be more to that?
We could go further down that rabbit hole, but I think
no.
that's enough for our first story.
There we go.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Save it for next Christmas.
Save it for next Christmas. The horror continues.
Please share your terrifying Santa stories.
Claus.
Yeah. If you've had weird encounters of Santa, email us at littlepodcasthorrors@gmail.com.
Especially if it was like a shadow Santa person, that would be cool.
That's not cool. That's frightening. But of course you think that's cool. Anyway.
Just some shadowy Santa, some shadow wearing Santa clothes, putting presents under the tree.
Mm-mm.
And when you run into it in the living room, just
and then dives into the tree and disappears.
Yeah.
I think that was the creepiest one. Well, my story is not my story. I will be shifting away from the scary and just more, I hope, interesting. So, but with that said, thank you, James, for making
that was good.
Making me afraid of Santa Claus. So
you're welcome.
Great.
That was good stuff.
Yeah. Well, it is Christmas season. And so my tale is going to be in the same theme, but we won't be talking about Santa, but we will be talking about history, my favorite thing. The thing
Of
with
terror.
of terror. Yeah. So when it comes to the Christmas season, it's always about like Santa and presents and songs and and of course Christmas stories. Now here's the thing. Something I think that many of us actually forget is that one, if not the most famous Christmas story of all, is about ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm talking about A Christmas Carol, written by Charles Dickens. Now, in the story, we are familiar. Everybody knows the story, I think, at this point. Ebenezer Scrooge is visited by four spirits. Actually, I was reminded by four spirits. He's visited by four spirits, but he also witnesses at one point the entire world itself is haunted. He witnesses all the souls of the damned wandering about. But mainly it's the four spirits that visit him. So anyway, yeah. Now, what many people may not know is that that's not the only story written by Dickens that involved ghosts. He also wrote The Haunted Man and The Ghost's Bargain in 1848. He also wrote The Signal Man. He wrote To Be Read at Dusk and The Hanged Man's Bride, just to name a few. Now, the reason being is that this in large part is because it was because of his interest in the paranormal itself. His friend and biographer, John Forster, once said about him, he had something of a hankering after ghosts, and he believed that Charles would have fallen into the follies of spiritualism had it not been for the strong retaining power of his common sense. Now,
Okay.
I mean, it's
Damn.
the Victorian age, and so you have to think about it. It's spiritualism is like at its peak, like
Yeah.
everybody's into that. So now, with that said, Dickens considered himself a skeptic and said that paranormal phenomenon had a psychological basis, that apparitions were the result of, as he put it, a disordered condition of the nerves or senses. And he even put that in his book, like in Christmas Carol, when Scrooge is trying to excuse Marley's ghost. He's like, it could be a piece of bread or a piece of cheese that I digested wrong. I'm paraphrasing terribly. I can't recall, but he, Scrooge even tries to, excuse it in his story, which it turns out it's not. But he also said, Charles Dickens did, that he said, I don't suppose that I'm so bold and arrogant as to settle what can and what cannot be after death. So while a skeptic, he retained an open mind. And it's because of this, he actually joined the London Ghost Club, one of the first paranormal research organizations, and it was founded in 1862.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Did they do like investigations and stuff?
Yeah, they would do investigations, and he actually attended like numerous seances. They would investigate claims, but more often than not, to debunk the phony phantoms of this business, because they were pretty much all frauds, which I think today is the same thing. It's mostly, a lot of them are frauds, not all of them, but I have, like I said, I've stated before, I have a hard time believing like psychics and that sort of thing, but yeah, I have a hard time trusting people that I don't know personally. So yeah,
And that want your money.
yeah, they want my money. Now, despite all this, Dickens recognized that society in the Victorian age, it longed for a good fright from a well-told ghost story, especially at Christmas, which is not something I would have thought of before I started researching this. Like I always thought about Halloween, but for some reason I never associated Christmas with ghost stories, even though we have the Christmas Carol. So go figure. Charles Dickens even called Christmas Eve the witching time for storytelling. So yeah, it stemmed from the belief that Christmas Day was the one time of the year where the spirits couldn't manifest. It was like the one time of the year you were safe, I guess.
Okay.
Unless of course you're Santa Claus, lurking around or something. I don't know.
Would that make it an anti-witching hour then?
I guess. I don't know. But either way, he remained interested in this subject for the remainder of his life. And after a long and fruitful career, Dickens passed away from a stroke on June 9th, 1870, and he was laid to rest at Westminster Abbey. But is that the end of the tale? Perhaps not. Located in Boston is what is the Omni Parker house, which Dickens called home at one point. Charles Dickens, during the tour of the US in 1867 and 1868, he actually stayed at the Parker House in an apartment on its third floor. And at the time, it was the best hotel to stay at in Boston, basically. And even the guy who owned it, Harvey Parker Jr., he was really happy to have Dickens stay there. And Dickens was a guest for 6 months because Charles' tour included readings from his works, and he is said to have practiced them in front of a mirror in his suite. So he would practice reading A Christmas Carol in front of this mirror. Now, the original hotel actually was torn down and then rebuilt in 1927 to kind of give it a much more modern look. But the records actually show that the door to Dickens' room was preserved at the time of the rebuild and donated to the Bostonian Society, which stored it until 2015 and then gave it back to the hotel. The mirror that he practiced in front of, that helped him prepare for his readings, is also on display at the hotel, and it's contained in the same walnut frame that Dickens saw. Now, perhaps because of this, people have claimed to have seen the spirit of Charles Dickens himself in the mirror.
It scared the Dickens out of him.
I guess there it is. I knew. I was like, James gonna make a pun to that. They've actually seen him. They've seen his figure. They claim to have seen his figure in the mirror itself. The elevator, also for reasons no one can explain, has been called hundreds of times to the third floor with no one in the elevator nor waiting for it. And of course, I mentioned the third floor. That's Dickens stayed on the third floor. Now, if Dickens truly is haunting the hotel, then he's in good company, seeing as there have been reports of multiple ghosts wandering throughout the hotel, including a man in colonial attire and a woman who died from pneumonia in the hotel in 1876. And I'm going to end this with a quote from Charles Dickens. "Ideas, like ghosts, must be spoken to a little before they will explain themselves." So, perhaps Dickens at long last became part of that which fascinated him for so long and longs to explain what he's discovered in the afterlife.
Cool.
Yeah. I'd want to go to that hotel.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's and it's not just Charles Dickens, who, so John Wilkes Booth stayed at this hotel. I think it said the weekend before he assassinated Lincoln, because he went down to Boston to visit his brother who was performing down there. Other famous people have stayed in that hotel. It's the historical significance alone is just
But only
amazing.
one of them screws with the elevator.
Yeah. Well,
Because
the
he's
thing
the
is,
one that's just Dickens around.
we don't. So they say it could be Charles Dickens because the third floor is also where the mirror is located. However, as I'd mentioned, there was a woman who passed away from pneumonia. She also passed away on the third floor. So, there's even been, like I said, there's even been reports of seeing the owner of the hotel himself, and then the man in colonial garb. So he was actually seen at the foot of a bed of one of the guests. Like the guest woke up and the man in the colonial clothes was just standing there.
Ew.
Yeah. But
These ghosts need to stop creeping.
But he's probably like, "Why are you in my bed?"
I guess. I would think. I'm sorry. I looked into
Thou
them.
gettest out of my bed.
That's not how they talk in Cologne. What are you're into Shakespeare? You're going way too far back, dude. And another country. And even then, they didn't talk like that. It's just Shakespearean plays. I don't know if I would be totally freaked out and more fascinated if I looked in the mirror and I just saw Dickens sitting there.
How would you know it was Dickens, though?
Well,
Do we know what he looked like?
Yeah, we've got there's photographs of him. Like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, he lived at the time. Yeah, he's got you can look at his picture. And this was near the end of his life. So these pictures would be pretty accurate to what you if you actually saw him, it would be like in the photograph. So
I don't want to be like, "Hey, since you're here, could you put on like a jolly robe and be the ghost of future present?
Come in and know me better, man. Oh, oh.
That'd be cool.
Just don't be the ghost of Christmas yet to come. So I don't know, but I think it's neat, and yeah. So that's my story. Short, not really creepy, but I found it interesting.
I love it.
Thanks.
Well, in keeping in tradition with telling ghost stories at Christmas, I have a true story for you. Okay. All right.
Create the ambiance.
Yes. Cue the creepy, spooky music. This is the story of Castle Fraser and its uncanny hauntings. Okay. So our tale begins.
Uncanny is a weird word. Like, what's a canny haunting? If there could be uncanny, what is canny?
It's not creepy or strange.
Let Christina weave her uncanny tale.
Yeah, come on, man.
So that we might shiver and be frightened.
All right. Our tale begins in 1639 at Castle Fraser in Scotland. On a frigid December evening, the Campbell clan paid visit to the Frasers with business in mind and deals to be done. Laird Michael Fraser welcomed the visitors warmly, offering lodging, food, and merriment in his newly built castle. As the lairds of each clan discussed the nuptials of their two eldest children, Alistair Fraser and Eva Campbell, the castle bustled in excitement and readied for a celebration in honor of the inevitable union. Eva was apprehensive about the betrothal. Laird Fraser's eldest son was known for his cruelty and malice, a disposition most disagreeable. Instead, she fancied the younger of Laird Fraser's sons, Frederick Fraser. He was charming, handsome, and of a rare kindness. As Frederick reciprocated Eva's feelings, they began a quiet, tender love affair. For 6 days, the two lovers lived blissfully, meeting in secret behind the garden, sneaking kisses in the staircase. At night, Frederick would visit her room, a room most coveted by the maidens of the house. The room was decorated in luxurious fabrics of rich, jewel-toned greens. A large fireplace tended by the house servants heated the room and cast a luminous glow across Eva's skin. Thus, under these romantic conditions, the two fell madly in love. As these deeds in these times tended to sour, our hateful Lord Alistair, who has had spies throughout the castle, did become aware of the affair upon the 7th day. Consumed with fury, Alistair plotted a most evil deed.
Come on, Alistair.
The night of the feast, to celebrate the deal that had been struck between the two clans, arrived with a palatable joy from Laird Fraser and Laird Campbell. The great hall teemed with excited villagers. Lady Eva sat stoically next to her betrothed, while Lord Alistair looked on, seething at his youngest brother's betrayal. Young Frederick, heartbroken at the union, but attempting to feign joy for the occasion, decided to drown his sorrow with a continuous flow of ale. As the night wound down, the young soon-to-be bride decided to return to her green room, hoping Frederick would follow soon after. The fire was burning bright as she changed into her sleeping gown and climbed into bed. She tried to stay awake, waiting for her love, but despite her efforts, she succumbed to sleep.
Way to misread the moment, Freddie.
All that ale, he's way too busy. After a time, she awoke to the sound of the large wooden door clicking closed. The party still audible down below. The fire had extinguished, leaving the green room cold and pitch black. "Announce yourself," Lady Eva shouted into the darkness. A creak, but no voice responded. Too quickly for her to move, boots crossed the room and a hand wrapped itself through her long hair and yanked. She let out a yelp as she was dragged from the bed. She put up quite the struggle, but the intruder was much too strong and she was easily overpowered. She felt the sharpness at her throat, then warmth running down the front of her. She tried to scream, but only a strange whistling of air escaped through the slit in her neck. The intruder dragged her from the room by her hair to the staircase, a trail of blood behind them. Too weak to struggle further, she looked up to identify her attacker, and from the ground she could see Alistair's maniacal face and knew he had exacted revenge for her love of Frederick. Alistair dragged her through the halls, not a soul aware of the atrocity that was taking place right above them. He left her body for his brother to find splayed across the bare rug of Frederick's room. He made haste to his own room and changed his bloody clothing and tossed them in the fire. He returned to the party as if nothing had happened. As young Frederick snuck off to meet his love in the green room, Alistair watched and followed so he could savor every moment of the discovery. Frederick ascended the stairs leading to her room. He pushed open the door but could not see in the black void. "Eva?" he whispered into the darkness. No response. Distraught and believing she had rejected him, he made his way back to his room. In the candlelit halls, he could see dark red streaks upon the floor. He followed the curious stains with dread in his heart. The trail led straight to his slightly ajar bedroom door. He pushed the door open further. His howl of grief could be heard in the great hall. Partygoers rushed upstairs to find the grisly corpse of our lovely maiden. They dragged young Frederick to the great hall to answer for his supposed crimes, as his brother Alistair licked his lips in ecstasy. Before Laird Campbell's feet, Frederick was thrown. He tried to speak through the sobs to tell him he hadn't committed this terrible crime, but the Laird, overcome with grief, took his sword and beheaded the boy before Laird Fraser could intervene. And so our story comes to an end. To this very day, those who visit the Castle Fraser can hear the whistling of our young lady through her slit throat. She is said to walk the stairs in her flowing nightgown, leaving a trail of blood behind her. Over the years, many have attempted to remove the bloodstains, only for them to return. Eventually, the stains were covered with new wood, snuffing out the very memory of what was done to Lady Eva Campbell. As for our young Frederick, occupants claim a vengeful spirit haunts the Great Hall, searching for the true murderer who took his love. The end.
Gee, I wonder who did it. I don't know. Maybe the guy that just licked his lips the moment the news broke.
Yeah.
Who could have done such a thing? No.
Delicious.
It's probably that other guy. Why are you getting horny over it? What the hell, man?
What's going on? I don't know
Popping a
why, but he's giving me
boner.
bad juju here.
Okay, so obviously I made up that whole story. But Castle Fraser is a real castle in Scotland that is supposedly haunted as fuck. And
It's where
one
the
of the
original
ghosts,
sitcom happened in the 1600s, the very first ever
the very first ever.
Yale Fraser.
Yo, Fraser. So it is supposedly haunted by a girl that was murdered in the green room, and supposedly you can see her bloody, kind of disfigured and walking around in like a flowing gown with a trail of blood behind her. So I did incorporate some elements of, legend from real people that have said that they've seen this.
All I know is that from now on, anytime my wife enters the room, I'm going to yell, "Announce yourself!"
I want you to do that. Please do that.
Every single time. Announce yourself.
Every single time.
And Laird Michael Fraser was the one that built the castle that stands today. So that part was true. I do not know if he had any sons. That's all. The rest of that was bullshit. But a creative writing exercise for me with I sprinkled in some
Freddy.
some things. And there is a supposedly kind of an angry, vengeful spirit, they say, that does haunt that great hall. So yeah, There you go. Merry
Obviously some bad
Christmas.
stuff happened there.
Maybe they need to be visited by, Santa the mischievous dick.
So as far as the girl, the legend is actually that it was a princess that was killed there. But there's no record of any princess ever being murdered in that castle. So they think that's more of an urban legend, but they don't know who the person is that people have seen all bloody and stuff. So anyway, there you go. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, guys.
At least it's a fake story. You don't have to be actually sad.
Well, it isn't.
Well, it's not entirely fake.
No,
the dead
it's
chick is
based
still
off of
dead.
real. Yeah, she's supposedly there's still a bloody
Well,
woman.
Sure.
Haunting
Yeah.
But she's not a
Castle.
princess, so
We don't care.
We can write
then
it
if
off.
She's not a princess. Well, anyway.
I loved it. Licking his lips.
I like the announce yourself part.
Announce
I'm
yourself,
gonna
woman!
adopt that.
Hmm.
Well,
I just
I'm
like
glad
the
you could
dad
take
who just
some
whips-
nuggets.
I just like the dad who whips his sword out. They're like, "What? No!" And just kills the son like right there, like the dude right there and there. Like, we could have like talked. Like, dude, man.
Well, okay, so I added that because even though the Frasers in this story, well, one Fraser was a bad guy, the Campbells were actually like notoriously hated, so and committed a lot of atrocities of their own. So I wanted them to be in the story and do something really stupid and fucked up.
I love it. I love
Um,
it. Yeah. No, I loved it. That was great. Oh my gosh. Well, that was fun. All fun. Christmas, Santa Clauses and ghosts and murders. I mean, it's not Little Podcast of Horrors if we're not talking about that stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that come into existence because you think about them too much, I have discovered that ever since the Shadow People episode, way too many listeners have been coming back saying they see shadow people. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just going to reiterate that Little Podcast of Horrors is not responsible for the manifestation of shadow people.
Not our fault, people.
Gotta have the waiver.
It's
Yeah.
your fault for believing us. And then
Vibrate.
creating a
Yeah.
shadow
Hey,
tulpa or whatever.
Vibrate responsibly.
Vibrate responsibly, guys.
Sweet. Alrighty. Well, that concludes our
Hail
Christmas.
Ashtar.
Hail Ashtar. That concludes our Christmas episode special. Tune in next Tuesday for
Just a normal plain Jane episode.
episode. Yeah, just episode 12. Just going back to regular stories of horror and unsolved mysteries and dippity doo. I think our next episode. Actually, we're going to be talking. We're going to be continuing in the realm of paranormal. It's my story, and we'll be discussing life after
Next
death.
time on Little Podcast of Horrors.
Next time on Little Podcast of Horrors, is life after death real? What really happens the moment our heart stops? Tune in. Same podcast time, same horror channel.
And as always, please like and subscribe. Yes, Christina.
Oh, I was gonna go into the business part here. Remember
Give
that
us
we
money.
we do accept donations. So, you
Yes.
can make it rain for Christmas if you want.
Yeah, I mean, if you feel a need. So, and coming soon, we will be having our website will be live with our store. We'll actually have a store too with merchandise. It'll be fun.
Yeah, we're just taking time to make sure it doesn't suck.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Don't like that. Don't want it to rock. And of course, if you have any stories to share, you can email us at littlepodcasthorrors@gmail.com. Other than that, happy holidays, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas.
Happy holiday.
Happy Kwanzaa.
Happy
winter-
Merry Ashtar Christmas. to you.
Happy winter solstice. And if you hear Santa rumbling around in the living room, don't go look.
Run.
Run.
Yeah, for
Get
real.
out.